Continue on with looking into the FMT package and trying to figure out what each procedure does and how to use it. We're going to look at the ePrint procedures in this video rather than the regular print procedures. And if you're new to programming and you've never really messed around with standard error or standard out, these procedures can seem confusing at first because they look like they do the exact same thing. They both just take what you put into them and they print it to the console window. And for all intents and purposes, that is basically what is happening. They are doing the exact same thing, but there is a subtle difference between them. Again, just for the sake of documenting my learning, in case anybody's wondering how I go about figuring this information out, I'm going to kind of show you the guided route that I took to learn this. And so if you go on the Odin website, you can go into the documents, go in the documents, you have the core packages down here, and this is where you can learn information about the FMT package. So we'll search for FMT down here. And then we can just click into it. And if we go down to the procedure sections, we can see that first of all, we have the print procedures, which I spoke about in the last video. And you can see here that it prints format using the default print settings and writes to the standard out. So if we then go ahead and look at the ePrint version of these procedures, for all intents, they look exactly the same, where they're taking in their arguments and they have a separator string, they have a flush and return an integer, just like the regular print function. But this one here states that it prints to the standard error. And we can see that that is true if we actually go into the file that these procedures are written in. We can see we have the print over here and the ePrint down here. And in case anybody is wanting to find where these files are, wherever you got Odin and installed it, in my case, I have the Odin folder in my root directory. I go into the core folder inside of there, inside of FMT. I have this fmt_os.odin. You should have that file somewhere on your system, depending on where you have installed Odin. And if we look into it, we can see the way these procedures actually work is that they are a wrapper around these fprint procedures above them. And the regular print, if you read into it, calls fprint, but it passes in OS standard out, whilst the ePrint versions of these procedures are, again, more or less the exact same thing, but they pass in OS standard error. And you can look up here and you can say fprint, one of its parameters is a os.handle type. So if we go back into the document and we look for the OS, the operating system package, we can see that there are two. Right now, OS 2 is set to replace operating system, the original OS package, as of recording this video. So if you're watching this in the future, there might just be OS and not a OS 2. But this ePrint procedure right here is working with the variable OS standard error, so stder, that you can see here, within the original operating system package. If we scroll down and we go into OS 2, you check its variables out, you see that it has the same variables. It has arg, standard error, standard in, and standard out. The ePrint is working with the OS package, not the OS 2. And we can have a look, and if we go back to that file, we can see it's looking for an operating system handle type. So if we go into here, we've got types, and we can see that, oh, there's a type here that is a handle. You can click into it if you want more information. You should. It's a great way of learning. But if we just click into standard out, we can see that standard out is a handle. And if we scroll up a bit, we can see standard it is also a handle. One thing to note is that these are variables. That means that their values can be changed within the code. And these handles are used for files. So standard error and standard out, to the best of my understanding, the way it's working in the background, is they're both essentially files, but they are set to dump their content into the console or terminal window by default. I think the biggest underlying difference between them is there is a buffer that is attached to standard out, which my understanding is kind of like a staging area where the information goes, it all gets collected, and then it gets pushed to the console window. Whereas standard error is unbuffered, which means the second it gets information, it pushes it to its source destination, the console or terminal in this case, as quickly as it can. I'm fairly confident what I just said is true. I don't 100% know if anybody has any links to documents or things I can read more about that just to confirm what I just said. Feel free to leave them. That'd be great. But as I was saying, and these both print out to the console window. So if we go over here, you essentially get this. We have our standard outputs data stream and our standard error data stream. And they are both just pointing to the console window for now, the terminal or console. Any text I put in here goes to console. Any text I go to standard error also goes to console. And we can see this replicated here. Inside of the little program I'll be running, we have the FMT package. And then again, we have OS. We're going to be using OS later on to redirect the output of standard error. But if we just use the regular print function and the regular eprint function, we can see the regular print function says this comes from standard out, whilst the eprint function says it comes from standard error. And if we just run this right now, the text gets printed. And again, if you're completely new to programming, computer science, you might think it's exactly the same. I'm just going to use print from now on. There's no point of error if it just does the same thing. And that's perfectly valid, because these are some of the things where somebody just needs to tell you that these exist. There's certain things in programming you just got to be told. And know about it, tinker, well, maybe if you tinkered enough, you'd eventually figure out some differences between them. But there's lots of programming where somebody's just got to tell you that it works a bit different, and this is the reason why. And the benefit of having these two different streams of data that they point, because they're both handles, we can change what they point to. So in this little example down here, standard error can be made to point to the console terminal, while standard out then decides to be pointing to some permanent text file. So we save the information that standard out gives us. Again, these are both handles. So what we can do is we can flip it around. We can say, hey, standard error, standard out, regular print function, just go to the console window. But if we do happen to get an error somewhere inside of it, I want to log that with standard error. And in this case, I want to make it point to a separate text file so I can save this error information to view it and debug later on. And we will see sort of that coming up now. So if I just delete these, just to go ahead and prove further that the standard error is just a regular print function. But as we saw, all it does is it points to standard error. We can see the eprint variation of it here. If I run this, we can see it just takes in the information. It prints it all out. Just like the regular print, we saw it had a separator in the last video. So if I do sep is equal to a comma, you want to make your CSV file, Odin.run, there it is again, but everything is separated by a comma this time rather than the default space. And I just threw an array here just in case anybody's curious. You can see here inside of the actual implementation of them that they take in this any kind of type. What this any means is just any data type you want printed out, you can throw it inside of it. I don't know how that actually works in the backend. I've not looked into it enough myself, but we can pretty much put whatever we want in here and we can just print it out. In this case, we're using the standard eprint. And just like with the regular print functions, we have the things that we can append on the end of them, the ln and the f. So the f stands for format and the ln stands for a new line. So if I just take this and then I print it in a bunch, we can see every time this error print with the ln postfix on the end of it, because that is a separate procedure itself. It's its own procedure. You can see eprint error, eprint ln down here, and this one actually calls the fprint ln variation of fprint. And we go ahead and not mess anything up. We run it, everything gets printed on a new line, and then again we have the standard regular formatted version of them. So if you wanted to pass in a formatted string, maybe as we want to have these error messages logged in a more human readable way, we can save out of that, run it again, we see our error formatted string. The array might have an error code in it. You can say error code 123 because some bool was true, and the array at index value 3 was 44. Maybe it's in your hypothetical program that is giving you some valid information on, oh, I actually figured out why this is broken based on those values that were just returned from that error string. And the demonstration that I showed, so I'll just show this one off again. If you append the ln after the f, which is kind of the standard notation of these print functions, we will get them all printed on a new line, just to demonstrate that one for you. So if we just get rid of them right now, as I mentioned over here, one of the advantages of having these two data streams that point to different things is we can change where one of them outputs without affecting the other one. and this gives us two separate locations for logging our data, which can be a very useful thing if you don't want to just log to console, because if you just log to the console window, it's not permanent. It will eventually disappear when the terminal goes down or you clear it yourself. So if you look here, all I'm doing is using the operating system package. So just the original OS, not the OS2 package for now, even though that one is set to replace OS. That is just because of the way things are implemented and this current version of Odin. ePrint targets the standard error variable that is inside of the original operating system package. So I'm just making a new file. I'm saying error file handle. I don't care about the error code. I'm blocking that one off. I'm saying os.open, passing in the name of some log file. And then I want to set the flags to os create and os read and write. So I create a file and then I read and write to that file. And I'm setting the mode. So that is the modes for the user, groups, and others if you're on Linux. I'm not sure about Windows. Does Windows have file modes? I'm not 100% sure on that one, as I've only really been introduced to them since moving over to Linux. But in order to get the read and write for the user and then the execute, no, just the read and write for the other and also the group users, I set that to fofo just to kind of give you an idea of where that is. If I go out of the format, again, in case you're not used to navigating by the terminal, inside of the Odin, again, inside of actual Odin that I got from GitHub, if we go into core, we will have the operating system package. And inside of the operating system package, you can see we have OS2, so that's where that lives for now. Eventually, that should get pushed just into regular OS. And I believe there is an OS Linux somewhere down here, because that's what I'm currently using, a version of Linux. If you're not, you might want to look at the OS Windows or the OS Mac. I'm sure that it's in here somewhere. That's what I'm going to look at right now. So CD into OS. And then I want to go into the OS version of Linux. And you can see it already jumped there because that's what I was looking for. These error codes for the user and for the groups. You can see that read, write, execute, search by group, search by others, and search by owner. Sorry, not user, owner. And you can see the codes here, and that's where I'm getting these values from. And the way I knew about... So you can see here I'm passing in flags, os.ocreate and os read write. You might be wondering where you get that information from. If you go back into OS, and there should be some constant values down here, and you can see them here. If I go into os.create, you can see that it creates a integer that holds onto this value. This gets passed into a bit set value. It's kind of outside the scope of this video, but I'm going to make a video on when I understand creating and using files more on later. But this is where I'm getting those values from off camera. Last week, I had to look more into it myself. But again, outside of the scope of this video for now, but that's kind of where I got these values from. So that's how I'm creating the file. And then what I'm doing, because I have a new file, if I was to come up here right now, and I take this line of code, and I paste it here, and then I go change the text to before setting the new handle, we can see that this eprint function right here will get printed to the console, because at this point in the program's life, it is still pointed to the console window. But as we've just made a new file, and in OS, when you create a new file using the original OS, it passes a handle. We saw that the standard error is just a variable that is of type handle. It is just an object of a handle. I can just say that the standard error is now equal to my file handle. It is now equal to this other place where information can go. And if I now print out to the standard error, you will see that the output has been redirected into this file so that it now lives for longer. So if I just do ln right here, and I'll get a few of these. So we'll just paste a few of those. And then we'll also see, we'll use the standard print. We'll grab a few of these. And then we'll kind of intermittently just put them in between these standard errors. And this is just to mimic, you know, the outputs from standard output getting used and error getting used along the same lines. And you can see that they're not messing with each other. Just because I changed the handle of standard error, standard output is still going to the console window. So if I go out of this, I'll make sure that file isn't created right now because I've been testing this. We'll remove that. So we don't have anything. We just have the main Odin folder in here right now. We'll clear this. And then when we do Odin run dots, did I just do regular print and not print? Because that might be horrible to read. Emblem.odin. Did I do regular print? I did. That's horrible. Let's just do some new lines here because that is abysmal to read. And that is why I use new line, because it makes things much easier to read for the human. We just print a few of those, dots it about, that should do it. Right, we'll clear that out again. Then we go back into, I don't know why I keep trying to use the hotkey, it's much faster for me just to type. And you can see before setting the new handle, normal text action setting, normal text to console, outputting normal text to console window. Have I messed it up again? Doing it live. Yes, I did. I accidentally copied the error instead of the print line. My bad. Okay, third time is the charm. I'm going to delete the file that was created. I'm going to clear one more time. And then we'll run it again. Okay, there we go. Nice and readable, hopefully. So we can see the first line is what we give the standard error to output. So we'd use the eprint, and this was before setting the new handle output, normal text to console output. I forgot to put the new line in that, so that line's obviously appended on there. I'm not fixing it again. And then we just get the random, not the random, the regular standard output printing to the console window. But we now have the extra file that has been created. So even if all this text disappears, if this was a real legitimate error message with useful information in, if we print this out, we can see that our error has been logged to the error file. And that can be very useful to us. So that is the big difference between standard error and standard out, that the print function actually points to standard, the regular print function points to standard out, and the eprint function goes to standard error. And hopefully that made sense. I think I kind of fucked this up towards the end, but yeah, that's my little explanation of the difference between the eprint and the print functions. Hopefully if you watched this far, you found something useful in this video, and I'll see you in the next one.